At the line table with our opinion panelists. Now this week, two Albuquerque city councilors are supporting a proposal to require more protections for workers in the state's largest city, that would be here in Albuquerque. It's called the Fair Workweek Act, and it would require, that employees are given advance notice of their schedules, paid sick leave, and other measures that aim to protect workers. And Tom, I want to start with you as a employer certainly here. One of the things that really jumped out at me, I mentioned the 3 weeks, so 21-day notice. However, the interesting part of that proposal is if you don't give notice, you owe the employee 4 hours of pay as sort of a makeup. What would that do to your business if you had to do that? You look in a very dynamic industry that changes all the time.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's our industry, and then there's frontline restaurant workers and
there's a difference.
Movie industry. Right. I mean, can you imagine the movie industry?
Right.
What this could do to films if they had to say you have to give us 3 weeks advance notice? Right. That's just goodbye film industry.
Things change hour to hour.
Yeah,
in that business, right?
This is it might have good intentions, but it's totally the wrong thing for so many reasons.
Do you have a philosophical to stand on that, the wrongness of it? What's the overall wrongness of it?
Well, the overall wrongness, it's not just the Fair Week proposal, but it's also, it's the spirit of what it represents, as well as the spirit of the pay equity ordinance changes that are going into place July 1st.
That's right.
I mean, in essence, nobody's against a fair workplace. Nobody's against pay equity.
Right.
But when you are trying to encourage companies to come to New Mexico and to do business with the city of Albuquerque, and our company does business, we have a contract with the city, it sends the wrong message saying, you know what, we want to get into your business. We want to be able to eventually manage how much you pay all of your employees. Now, personally, I'll put all of my wages up against any other PR firm or any other professional services firm in town. So, when we look at, a lot of these impacts not going to happen, but you're asking me to turn over employee names or employee positions, how much they're making, how many days a week. Hey, that's not going to stay private, and that's proprietary information as far as I'm concerned.
Interesting.
So that's my philosophical issue is that these are not business-friendly practices. They make us feel good, but it's not going to help small business.
Marissa DeMarco, Isaac Benton, who along with Clarissa Pena are the sponsors of this bill, he says, as a sponsor, that this whole thing is a response to the changing dynamics of the American workplace, including here in Albuquerque. I'm not quite sure what he means by that. Did you have an interpretation of that?
Yeah, actually, I talked to him about it a couple of hours ago. But he's talking about the fact that so many people are not working traditional 40-hour-a-week jobs that have things like sick leave, that have predictable schedules. And in fact, a lot of adults in New Mexico are working several part-time jobs. And his bill is aimed to, or his measure is aimed to really look at how to craft employee regulations so that people can have some predictability in their schedules so they can line up their several jobs as they work to support their households. When I talked to him too, he was saying that this measure is really like a starting point for a conversation, and he anticipates that it's going to get changed considerably through the process of working with his other counselors and working with the mayor, and that if he was going to stick with a couple of points in the measure, it would be that there is that people can accrue sick leave and that they can have predictable scheduling.
Okay.
So those seem to be like the main points that he would like to get across in the measure.
Interesting. Laura, you've been around the horn on this as an employer and as an employee. And how did this strike you initially? Is it workable? I guess is my first.
Well, I think there's aspects of it that are workable. I definitely think that there are some that would make it much more difficult for the employer to be able to do. It will have an impact on employers potentially in terms of if they have to pay somebody a certain number of hours because they made a change, and they don't need them for a particular shift. There's certain work, my work, like Tom's, is pretty predictable in terms of the workday. So I think certain industries would be able to comply in terms of the scheduling part. But there are some that don't. They have to deal with demand. They have to deal with events. There's a lot of food services, obviously, and tourism in this state where it changes, it varies quite a bit. So you have to scale up and scale down depending on demand. And a lot of that sometimes is outside the employer's control. So I think those kinds of things, there's probably room for negotiation, and it sounds like, Councilor Bennett is probably pretty, or Benton, excuse me, is probably pretty realistic that some of that will need to be shaped as they go through the process.
Daniel, one of the things that struck me of the bullet points here, it's a 23-page idea, by the way, it's pretty involved. The idea that if you're going to hire somebody new or create a new position in your company, that you have to offer that position to somebody that's already working in your company before you can offer it to somebody on the outside, that seems to be fraught with problems. Let's say you have a gender imbalance in your company. You want to bring on some more women. Why would you have to be forced to give the guy first crack at this new job if you're looking to, either diversify your work? You know what I'm saying? It's sort of unworkable at that point. It seems to me.
This is comic relief at its best. The government and the city can't even operate efficiently. They can't hire cops that won't kill people, and yet they want to come tell me how to run my business. This is exactly why people are frustrated with government. It's not a party affiliation. It has nothing to do with that. These clowns have no idea what it means to sign the front of a paycheck. They've spent their entire career signing the back of a paycheck, and they think at the end of the day, you get a 9-person company, I think.
And
it's easy when you got a 9-person company and you're not following any of these rules, and they'll exclude themselves like they always do from this stuff. This stuff is a measure of hypocrisy that's never been seen. They're asking private business to do things they're not doing in the city with their employees today. They have the ability to implement these things within the city. They won't do it. They haven't done it. They excuse themselves from doing certain things. It's a joke. They have no business putting their nose into private business. None whatsoever. These people are not, none of this stuff deals with, nobody's being asked to deal with poisonous chemicals, work extended hours without being paid. There's plenty of laws to, because none of this deals with it. That's what the law deals with. If you're being asked to do something that's outside of the labor laws, there's a million ways to file a complaint. These guys coming up with what I will call the no work week proposal is going to show businesses this is not a city to come to. It's going to add to the exodus that we've seen out in New Mexico, and it's another do-gooder proposal that has no idea of the ramifications.
This is a talker, I'm telling you. Go ahead, Tom.
Hold a secret ballot for employees to adopt an alternative schedule. I mean, that is absolutely bogus.
As an ex-employer, I would go wild if that happened in my shop. Wild.
This Fair Week proposal is the best economic development program Bernalillo County has, and Bernalillo County has a lot of great economic development
Rio Rancho says thank you very much.
I mean, if you do that, that's just total silliness. Because not only that, then you get into the whole right to work argument. Because if they're voting about that, are they going to organize and stuff? And that's just, it opens up a whole bunch of issues that really, it's really between an employer and their employee. And granted, there's a lot of industries that, where you have a really good positive employer-employee relationships. There's some that are just horrid. And you know what? Yeah, we need to be able to help those organizations. But doing everything with everyone, forget it.
Exactly right. Go ahead,
Gene,
Laura,
there's so much name calling and reaction here, but I think when you remove the broad strokes that have been shared here, I think reasonably people can look at this bill and think about what the intent is behind it, or this ordinance, and talk about where there's actually some common ground that could do some good. I think there is an advantage to having a stable work week for employees. I think you have more happier employees, more stable employees, people who can actually take care of their families, and I think that benefits the overall community. So there are parts of this, I think, that should be considered very seriously. There are other things that probably are unworkable, and I think that the important thing is that reasonable minds be able to talk about it without the name calling and the reactions.
People who write 27 pages of stuff like this are not reasonable. You can't negotiate with people like this.
How many times did you find bills like that in the legislature?
A million times, and we didn't negotiate with those people.
There you go. Up next, we learn about a local mentoring program that aims to support students all the way through high school.